Hi everyone, so in this video I'll be talking about the irregular verbs, specifically the words sum and pasum. And if you watch the other verb videos, you should already be pretty familiar with the present, imperfect, and future forms of sum, but I'm still going to go ahead and review them in this video. And I'll go ahead and write down the dictionary entries of sum and pasum. Hold on one second. Sum, esse, fui futurus, and it means to be. And then pasum is pasum, passe, patui, and there's no fourth principal part, and it means to be able. And you'll notice that the verb pasum doesn't have a fourth principal part, and that's because there's no passive form of the word. And if you remember, many of the passive forms were formed by transforming your fourth principal part. So because your verb isn't passive, there's no fourth principal part. And because think about it, like if you try and make to be able passive, it doesn't really work. It is abled. It doesn't really make sense. It turns out that there's also no passive forms of sum either, but the fourth principal part is also included because of the participle form, and we'll get on to that later. We're going to discuss that more in depth. And sometimes, depending on which source you look at, sum might not even have the fourth principal part. So anyways, I'll start out by introducing sum and then pasum. Okay, so I'll start out with the present form of sum. And if you're familiar with the perfect passive indicative, then you already should know the present tense of sum. So let me write it down now. Let's see. This is, hold on, a different color. Sum. And we're starting out with the present. And remember, there's no passive forms of either, so that makes things a bit easier. Okay, so let me just write it down for you. There's, in black, first, second, third person, singular, and plural, and it goes sum, est, sumus, estis, sunt. Okay, and if you notice, it's kind of helpful to think about it. If you look at the endings of each of these, that's supposed to be an S, the last few letters of each of these words, they correspond to the present active endings for regular verbs, except for the first one. It's OST, muss, his, und, but, or Mr. T right there, but usually it's OST, but they're pretty similar. Okay, so now for the future tense. Okay, and again, like I said, if you know other verb forms, you should already be pretty familiar with these forms, and you should know 3 of the 6 indicative forms of sum. So it turns out that the future perfect active verb endings for regular verbs use the future form of sum. Let me repeat that again. The future perfect active verb endings for regular verbs use the future form of sum. So let me just write that down now. Singular and plural. 1, 2, 3. And it's ero, eris, erit, erimus, eritis, erint. Okay, so now on to the imperfect. On to the imperfect. And the imperfect form of sum is the same as the endings for the pluperfect active indicative. And here they are, singular, plural, 1, 2, 3. And it's eram, eras, erat, eramus, eratus, erant. Okay, So now that you have the imperfect tense, let's go over the perfect. And let me write that down quickly. We're moving on to the perfect. And the perfect tense of assume is actually pretty easy to learn since it's formed according to the perfect tense rules. And you do the same thing for the perfect form of assume that you do for all other regular verb forms for the perfect tense. So all you do is take your third principal part, so if you remember it's fui, cross off the I and add your endings, and let's do that. Perfect, singular, plural, 1, 2, 3, and it's fui, fuisti, fuit, fuimus, fuistis, fuerunt. And your pluperfect and future perfect are both formed according to the rules as well, which makes them a lot easier to remember. If you recall, for the pluperfect, you also cross off the I of your third principal part, and then you add the imperfect forms of sum, which is eram. So let's do that. And this, again, is the pluperfect. And these are all forms of sum. Pluperfect, and again, just formed according, wrong color, formed according to the rules. And they are fueram, fueras, fuerat, fueramus, fueratis, fuerant. Okay, so now we're moving on to the future perfect. Okay, so again, we'll make a chart. Okay, so you do the same thing that you do for the pluperfect, except instead of adding the imperfect forms of sum, you're going to go ahead and add the future endings. So let's do that. And you add them to your third principal part with the I crossed out. So it's fuero, fueris, fuerit, fuerimus, fueritis, fuerint. Okay, so now that you have all the indicative forms of the verb sum, let's translate each. Okay, so let's just go to the beginning, and I'll just translate the first person singular. And this should be translated as, let me use a different color that will show up better. This is I am. Okay, and then the future will be I will be. And I'm just doing the first person singular so you get the idea. Imperfect was I was being. Perfect was or is I was. And pluperfect will be, let me write it off to the side, I had been. And finally, the future perfect will be I will have been. Okay, so now we're moving on to our possum. And we'll cover each of these forms for those as well. Okay, so the present possum is actually very similar to the present form of sum. So I'll give you a little trick to remember it. Let's start out, first of all, let me write present. Let's start out by making our chart, and we can go ahead and just write down the present form of sum. Sum, make sure you leave a little bit of room because we're going to add something. Sum, est, sumus, estis, sunt. And here's a little trick. So, if the form of sum starts with an S, write down POS in front of it. And once again, this is just a single word. So let me go ahead and do that. And if it starts with an E, you put a T in front of it. Okay, so let's just go through them. It's possum, potest, potest, possumus, potestus, possunt. So there you go. That's the present tense of possum. And actually, the future and imperfect forms of possum are even easier to do. Let's go ahead and we'll write down the imperfect tense. Okay, so let's go ahead and write down, hold on one second. Let's write down all our forms for the imperfect tense of sum. But first we have to write our chart. Sorry, I did that in the wrong color. It's okay though. Eram, eras, erat, eramus, eratus, and erant. Okay, so if we follow the rule, and since all of them start with an E, let's put a pot in front of them. P-O-T. Poteram, poteras, poterat, poteramus, poteratus, poterant. There you go. Okay, so now again for the perfect, let's go ahead. Actually, let's go ahead and do the future right now. Okay. And you're going to go ahead and do the same for future. Put down all the future forms of sum. And as you remember, first let's make our chart. Let's put down our future forms of sum. Ero, eris, erit, erimus, eritus, erint. And again, since they all start with the with an E, go ahead and put your P-O-T in front of all of them. Potero, poteris, poterit, poterimus, poteritus, and finally poterint. Okay, so now for the perfect, again, it's formed the same way as all other perfect active indicative verbs. You take your third principal part and you add the endings. So let's go ahead and do that. This is for the perfect. There it is. Perfect. Make our chart, singular, plural. And just the same way that all other perfect forms are formed. And we're doing possum now. So if you remember, the dictionary entry was possum, posse, potui. So you would write down potu, your third principal part minus the I and all the spaces. Potu, 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 potu. So you're going to go ahead and write down isti, it, emus, istis, and erunt. Okay, so the pluperfect and future perfect are again formed the same way. See if you can form the future perfect and pluperfect yourself, and if you want, you can pause the video. Okay, so let's go ahead. Here, I'll just give you a second, and then we're going to go ahead and do the future and future perfect forms of the word. Okay, so now let's go with the pluperfect. And again, let's make our chart. And for the pluperfect, what you would do is you would take your third principal part and just put the stem down again. And because for pluperfect you add the eram, eras, erat endings, you're going to go ahead and do that. It'll be potu eram, potu eras, potu erat, potu eramus, potu eratus, potu erant. Okay, and now it's almost the same thing for the future perfect. And let me go ahead and write that down. Future perfect. Singular and plural. 1, 2, 3. Okay, and again, just take your third principal part, put it down in all the spaces. Just keep on jotting it down. And then you're going to add your future tense endings. Potuero, potueris, potuerit, potuerimus, potueritis, potuerint. Okay, so there you have it. Those were the indicative forms of the sum and possum. I'll introduce the subjunctive forms of sum and possum in the subjunctive video. So until then, thank you for watching.